This is the Situation Room. In the room this week is Eric Latif and Nduoko Siti Muga has taken a break to rejuvenate and refresh his cells. So therefore, in his absence, I have the day's proverb. Today, this one is advice to the people who are stuck where again? On Kiambu Road.
Yes.
All of them, Kiambu Road, same place.
Yes.
All monkeys cannot hang from the same branch.
So somebody needs to get off Kiambu Road?
Yes. All monkeys cannot hang from the same branch. This is the message that is today's proverb. So we'll be having our guest in the studio shortly, and this is Tanzania's opposition leader, Tundu Lissu, the man who contested, one of the candidates who contested against President, the late John Pombe Magufuli in the last election. He had just come into the country, into Tanzania, from where he had been previously, and this is Belgium. Came in, campaigned, and then what happened after that, the experience that he went through, basically led him to leave the country again. He's now in the country, in Kenya. He participated in several engagements last week and on Friday. Came here to launch a book. He'll be telling us about the book. Has several conversations. At the same time, it's also coinciding with about 100 days since President Suluhu Hassan was sworn in as president. And there's what we have seen. Are we seeing a difference between the government of Suluhu Hassan and that of John Pombe Magufuli? Are we seeing a difference in the political landscape in Tanzania now that it's Suluhu Hassan who is the president and not John Pombe Magufuli? It's still the same political party. It's still CCM, Chama cha Mapinduzi. It's still the same person. This was the former president's vice president. But she has her own way of doing things. Speaking now to somebody who actually understands the politics of Tanzania, will seek to understand whether now this is also a different way of doing things by the president and whether it has any impact.
I mean, I think there was a lot that was expected when we saw, first of all, the unexpected death of Magufuli. And then there was the expectation that with a new president that you would see a different political dispensation. So now that is the question. Is it guaranteed because you have a different individual that then you have a different way of doing business politically in Tanzania? Is it the expectation that, all right, things that were seen to have been wronged, and I say that quote unquote, during the time of Magufuli, would they then be righted, if that can be used as a word, then when a different president comes into place, or a different dispensation, a different administration then is in place? There's a lot of assumption going on here. Or is it that the legacy of one is being carried on using a different yardstick or a different measure?
Yeah.
So what exactly are we looking at then becomes the question.
Indeed. I want to welcome our audience on KTN Home who are joining us now for the next 1 hour. Welcome to the Situation Room. This is on Spice FM and online, Spice FM KE, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Our guest is in the studio, Tundu Lissu from Chama cha Demokrasia na Maendeleo, Chadema in Tanzania. We've spoken to you several times, but on video. Welcome to the Situation Room. This is called the Hot Seat. We hope to make it warm enough for you to enjoy the stay here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and I'm so glad I'm meeting some friends who I have not seen physically.
Yep.
I'm so glad to be able to see you in person, and I truly appreciate being here. Yeah.
When did you get into the country?
I came in on Wednesday last week. We had a meeting here. I had a meeting with my colleagues from Tanzania, from the party. But I also came specifically to launch a book that I wrote last year, just before the elections, that has just been published. And it's about East African politics, East African parliaments, to be exact. So I came here for that purpose. And being in Kenya, being in the land of the free, I could never miss an opportunity to talk to the Kenyan people and to the East African people through the Kenyan media, which is a very free media. I'm happy I'm here.
you're not shy about that, Tundu, to say that, in a land that is free, then of course giving an indication that you're saying that it's not free in Tanzania.
In Tanzania, it has not been free for a very long time. And certainly, it has been a prison of sorts in the past 5 years, since 2015, when the late President John Pombe Magufuli came to power. He's taken the country through a path that we had never taken in our entire history, a path of murder and mayhem, and it has had a telling effect on freedoms writ large, on personal freedoms. We have hundreds of political prisoners, of prisoners of conscience languishing in our prisons, and Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan is doing a lot now to clean our prisons of these people who should never have been in prison in the first place. But I spoke specifically of the free media in Kenya. And Tanzanian media of the past 5 years has been conspicuous by its complete subjugation by the state. They basically become mouthpieces of the Magufuli Ikulu. And so when I say we are not free, that is what I mean.
Would you compare the media in Tanzania today? How would you compare to the media before Magufuli took over? For example, in the years of Jakaya Kikwete, would you say that the media then was more free? Was it at the same level, at par with Kenya's media?
I will not say we have ever been at par with our East African neighbors, and I have here our Kenyan and Ugandan neighbors. Burundi and Rwanda don't really come into the equation. But we have never been, even during our best years in terms of media freedoms, you could never compare the Tanzanian media scene with the Kenyan scene or the Ugandan scene. We have always had a very restrictive, very authoritarian media atmosphere in the country throughout the years of one-party state. Basically, things started going very wrong with the nationalizations of the independent media in 1968-69. Tanzania was by then already a one-party state, and everything then came under the control and ownership of the state. So there was no there was no media other than government-owned media until the late 1980s. After the 80s, with the introduction of multi-party system, things improved somewhat. And I say somewhat because we did not democratize wholeheartedly. We opened up a bit, but some of the areas remained tightly controlled by the state through a variety of devices, legal and at most often purely administrative. So our media scene you can never compare it with the Kenyan media in that sense. But things were much better during the Kikwete years than they became during the 5 years of President Magufuli.
Right.
It became what was done on an ad hoc basis. There was always a crackdown on critical media during the Kikwete years, but you could tell that that was not a government policy. You could tell that the government was reacting to specific events.
Yeah.
With Magufuli, basically, there was a declaration of war in very clear terms by the president himself on national television. There was a declaration of war on the media, with the president saying at one time that the media should not think that it is that free on record. And then we started seeing disappearances of journalists, closure of media houses, heavy fining of television stations, shutting down of radio stations and newspapers and so on and so forth. Murder and mayhem. We have journalists who have been disappeared after being taken by what for all intents and purposes are state security operatives, and they've never been seen to date.
Right.
And therefore it was really bad. Yeah.
Can you look at the current political dispensation with Mama Suluhu right now without taking into consideration the leadership of Magufuli? Is it possible? And I ask that because a lot has been said right now, especially because of things that you have said recently, things that you said on the day that it was then announced that he had essentially passed, things that you said when he was declared winner of that election.
Things that I have said from the day he became president in 2015.
And through his
yes,
administration.
That's right.
Is it possible then to look at Tanzania today without that experience? And I ask that because a lot of people will say, you know what, Tundu, accept and move on. These things have happened. Now let's look at Tanzania moving forward. Is it possible to do that without considering all of these?
Those who forget their past are bound to, those who forget the mistakes of their past are bound to repeat those mistakes. We can never move on without a proper accounting of that past, without proper closure. You Kenyans went through hell, and I know this because I have been following Kenyan politics and society and Kenya's struggles for democracy for decades. You went through hell. You went through the dark days of the Moi crackdown of your freedoms during the 80s after the attempted coup of 1982. You had disappearances. You had political killings. You had, the torture chambers everywhere. Yep. And how did you move on? You got yourselves a new constitution. You got yourselves, as part of that new constitutional order, you got yourselves something that I've read. It's called Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission. That is what has allowed you to move on. And therefore, those of our friends who are telling us to move on, they're basically telling us to what the Swahili say, funika kombe maharamia yapite. Basically, close your eyes about your terrible past and, forgive and forget.
Let bygones be bygones.
Forgive and forget. We may forgive. We should never forget.
Are you willing to
if
forgive?
If we forget, we will have another Magufuli.
Are you willing to forgive? Because going by your latest statements, it sounds like you're saying, I want to forgive, but conditionally.
Forgiveness is always conditional. There is nothing, even before God, there is nothing like unconditional forgiveness. You have to repent. You have to do a penance. You have to say, Baba, nimekosa mimi, nimekosa sana, ndio maana naomba msamaha. That is what we do in church, right? So, forgiveness is sought and given. Now, the political forgiveness for crimes of state, for crimes against the people by a government or its agencies is given, typically it has become customary now, in civilized nations like Kenya, it's given in the context of truth, justice, and reconciliation. That is what you Kenyans did. That is what South Africans did after, the post-apartheid South Africa with the Bishop Tutu Commission, Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That is what Tanzania needs very badly. To have a proper accounting of our history.
Sure.
And I need to clarify this because we have we have been hitting Magufuli very hard, and it is right to do so because it took us on a path that we'd never experienced before. But we should never forget the fact that things were not always hunky-dory before Magufuli came to power, even in terms of media freedoms. Attacks on the media and attacks on journalists did not start with Magufuli. They go back a long way in our history.
So why does it appear, if that's, I mean, it's clear to everybody, but then why does it appear as though, or did they get to the height during his administration, or did it come out in a way that had never been experienced before during his administration? And then connected to that, Tundu, is that you have a national as well as a personal experience with this administration that you say must admit to its wrongdoing. And of course, you having suffered a physical attack, having been shot 17 times, are you asking also for, and I would ask, who shot you? Who made you? Who committed this thing against you that obviously gives you this personal feeling that something must be done, somebody's got to apologize, somebody has got to repent, as it were. So why does it seem as if things got worse, in your opinion, during Magufuli's time?
Yeah, they got worse because they got worse. As I said, things were not always very good prior to Magufuli. But Magufuli took us on a wholly different level altogether. Magufuli declared war. There was always undeclared war. There was always persecution. And many people look at me and they all they think of is the shooting. It was very bad. It was totally unprecedented. But I'll tell you this. I was arrested for the first time on Christmas Eve of 2002 when Ben Mkapa was still president and charged the next day on Christmas Day with sedition. So this is not someone who has just who appears to have an axe to grind against Magufuli. The truth of the matter is there has always been political persecution, and I have been persecuted. I have these terrible personal experiences, not just with Magufuli, but with beginning with Ben Mkapa in Christmas 2002. During the Kikwete years, as a member of parliament, between 2010 and 2015, when Kikwete was serving his last term, I was arrested and charged in court with sedition. I've always been charged with sedition. Sedition is a classic political offense. It's a classic free speech offense. Now, during the Kikwete years, I was arrested and charged in court on 3 different occasions. I was actually beaten up once by the police, really humiliated. But that was during the Kikwete years. Under Magufuli, things took on a wholly new hue. Things took on a wholly new level. War was declared on us openly, with Magufuli stating in February of 2016 that he would see to it that by 2020 there is no opposition. So whatever followed after, including the shooting, was to
a manifestation of his threats.
Not a manifestation, but an implementation of that declaration of war. So I'm lucky I survived.
Indeed,
I
you
was
are.
hit 16 times, but I survived.
If you
There
look
are
back,
so
then,
many
Tundu,
people who are not that lucky.
didn't survive.
Who didn't survive. There are people who were, let me finish. There are people who were picked up sometimes at night, often at broad daylight, and we've never seen them again. There are people hundreds, who were arrested from their homes, from their farms, from their shops, from mosques, from prayer houses, and their bodies were found, floating in River Rufiji in the south and on our Indian Ocean beaches. Terrible, terrible things that did not happen during the previous years. So when we speak so much, we concentrate so much on Magufuli, it is not because there were no abuses before his becoming president, but he took the country on a completely different new level of repression.
Things came to a head basically during his time. Would you say that he was facilitated by the system that is Chama cha Mapinduzi? Because you've said one-party system, moving into multi-party democracy, but still with the other administrations, there was still elements of oppression and repression and persecution of opposition voices. And then they come to Magufuli's time and they blow up. Could that have happened if the system that is CCM was not supporting him?
That's a great question, my brother. Magufuli was a logical consummation of this system of oppression that we had inherited during at independence in 1961. That was massively consolidated during 30 years of one-party rule, and that was not properly democratized when multi-party system was reintroduced in 1992. We have a constitutional, legal, and institutional order that still is essentially in the image of our one-party era. All institutions of the state are tightly controlled by the president, who has always been the chairperson of the ruling Chama cha Mapinduzi. Chama cha Mapinduzi itself has never really been a political party. It has been a political system. It has been part of the state structures for as long as you go back to 1964 when we 64, 65 when we became a one-party state. It was never completely divorced from the state. So you look at all these top generals in the army, the heads of the police, people in the intelligence services, people who get employed in this service, they are all CCM cadres. These are all political operatives. You look at our administration, it is very much like provincial administration during the Kenyatta and the Moi eras, Kenyatta 1 that is. These are extensions of the political establishment. These are the armed wings, if you will, of this state party. Now, that was never completely done away with, in spite of repeated demands, not just by the political parties like Chadema, but even with recommendations of various presidential commissions that were tasked with charting the democratic way forward for our country. But democratization was done half-heartedly, and of course, half-hearted democratization did not hinder the growth of the political opposition. By 2015, Chadema had become the most powerful political force outside the state. Something had to be done, and that something that had to be done was Magufulism. Was this wave of political repression that followed the assumption into office of President Magufuli. So one way of looking at what happened after 2015 is to look at the growth of the opposition prior to 2015 and up to 2015.
Right.
Because you remember, the Magufuli's vote tally in 2015 was the lowest of any CCM president since the introduction of multi-party politics. So he comes to office with one overriding aim. This monster of the opposition has to be destroyed.
Has to be dealt with.
Has to be destroyed. And that is what he said openly on February 6, 2016.
Right.
I will see to it that by 2020, by the next general election, we have no opposition.
Big one. Thank you very much. We're having a conversation with Tundu Lissu. He is Tanzania's main opposition leader. He contested the last presidential election under Chadema, Chama cha Demokrasia na Maendeleo in Tanzania. Of course, he has very many issues to say about that particular election. We'll be talking about that. And also, what's the future? What's the way forward for Tanzania going forward? I want to take us back to what you were saying earlier, that forgiveness comes and it's conditional forgiveness, but also forgiveness is sought. Forgiveness is not given to somebody who has not sought forgiveness, some sort of penitence. Now, in the case of Tanzania, what is it that you'd like to see going forward? Is it a TJRC established? And bear in mind, TJRCs in this country, there was a TJRC whose report has not yet been discussed in Parliament. In South Africa, yes, there was a TJRC move, and it bore its fruits. In Liberia, we've seen TJRC. In Rwanda, we've seen their form of TJRC in terms of the Gacaca courts. But what kind of reconciliation and forward-looking country would you want to see?
That's a very good question. The kind of moving forward that we have specifically demanded is the formation of our own TJRC, Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission. Reconciliation can only be meaningful if it is based on truth. If we know who did what, why, on whose orders, if there is a complete accounting of those crimes of the past. But that truth alone is not enough, even though they say that truth shall set thee free. Truth is the beginning, but it is not all. Truth must lead to justice to the victims. Just imagine of parents or spouses or children of those who have disappeared without trace. Think of the unexplained dead bodies in gunny bags found floating in our rivers and our ocean beaches. What about the loved ones of all these people who were disappeared and by all appearances appear to have been murdered? So there must be justice. There must be some form of justice. Now, the justice that we're talking about here is not necessarily punitive. It is not necessarily sending people to the gaol or sending people to jail. But the victims or the victims' families have to be properly compensated. You have to right the wrongs to the victims, as you rightly put into. And then, when you have had truth and you have had justice, then that will lead to reconciliation. We will be able to then say, never again.
Right. Who's responsible for that right now? Looking at the new administration that's in place, who would be responsible?
We all have a role to play, but the new president has a very special role in this regard. If there is no political will, there will never be truth, and there will never be justice, and therefore there will never be reconciliation. And therefore, it is the president and her government who should lay the basis for all these things to happen. That is what happened in Kenya. Even though you were saying that the report has never been publicly or properly debated, but at least it was done. And then the struggle to make it properly debated should continue. So the president should make that move. If she doesn't, no one will. That is what happened with the Truth and Justice Commission of Bishop Desmond Tutu. It came with President Mandela. People misread Mandela when they say, Mandela forgot, they forgave, and he moved on. He didn't. He said, we should own up to the crimes of the past before we can move on.
Right.
So it has to come, the move has to come from the president. President herself. In our system of government, in our system of administration, the president is an all-powerful figure. The president hovers over the nation like Colossus. And therefore, it has to come from the president. It cannot come from some lesser mortal somewhere. It has to come from the top.
Looking at her 100 days in office, do you have hope and faith that she can actually steer the country towards that direction?
I have some misgivings. The first 100 days have been a roller coaster. There is no doubting the fact that the nation has heaved a massive sigh of relief, a collective sigh of relief. You cannot begin to imagine how good the feeling is across Tanzania today, simply because of just the change of tone. We were used for 5 years. We were used not only to physical violence and intimidation. We were not used just to attacks, physical attacks, and all this repression. We were used to emotional and verbal abuse from the president himself. We were used to our mothers, our daughters, our wives, our aunts being insulted openly in the most horrible misogynistic fashion you can imagine by the president himself. And here comes Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan, softly spoken, very reassuring, very loving, a typical mother. And therefore you have this a huge, you know.
So with that sigh of relief, Tundu,
yes.
Why won't you go back? If the sigh of relief is being breathed at the moment, and it would appear as though the new administration is more than anything saying, maybe there's a change in the way in which we are going to do things. Is that enough of an invitation for you, Tundu Lissu, to say, all right, it's time for me to go back? You've been a political refugee for a long time.
Yes, for 4 years.
Why is it not time?
It is not time yet. Again, it is not time yet because of President Samia Suluhu Hassan. And that's why I said I still have some misgivings. She has made some very useful moves. She's freed some prisoners. Some high-profile prisoners have been set free. She has made some attempts at cracking down on the worst aspects of the Magufuli apparatus. We are talking here of district commissioners who basically, now we know from the government itself, are just murdering people. And so she's taken some action against one or two of these individuals. But the problems go deeper. The problems are systemic. We have had, Magufuli was able to do all that he did, not because he was evil. He was not because he was just evil. I believe he was completely evil. But he had his aiders and abettors. He was aided and abetted. There was complicity in these crimes at so many levels. And it is these aiding and abetting of crimes that we should focus on. Magufuli as a person is gone. To what extent is Magufulism, this kind of a system that allows security forces to kill, to abduct, to disappear with complete impunity. These are things that we should focus on, and these are things that, unfortunately, Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan is not talking about. She's going after individuals, and very few at that. She's making sacrificial lambs. Now, sacrificial lambs are wholly insufficient. We need a complete overhaul of the system, and she's on the few occasions that she has touched on these systemic issues, she has given us more reason to worry than to hope. She has said, for instance, that those who want a new constitution have a long wait to do. This was the vice chairperson of the Constituent Assembly that was convened in 2014 to try and write a new constitution for the country. And here she is as president, as someone who has massive powers to make things happen. And on this particular matter, which is very important, which she is tied with very personally, and she's saying that we should not expect much from her. On my specific issues, the issues about the attempted assassination, in her favor, and this is, I've always said it many times, Mama Samia is the only person from the government of President Magufuli, and from the CCM, who came to visit me when I was fighting for my life at the Nairobi hospital here in Kenya. She came to visit me, and my sources from the inside the government told me then that she was severely castigated by President Magufuli for doing that. So if there is one person in CCM and in the government who knows from first-hand experience, from seeing me and the way I was, it is her.
So she's fighting in your corner.
She has said absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Would you have expected, Tundu, would you have expected, by virtue of the fact that she's now in government, seeing her 3-4 years ago, having come to see you, and then learning that she was castigated for that action? So are you saying that your expectation then of her then becoming president would have been that you would have seen such a faster response to some of these things that you're requesting or that you're asking for?
I expected her to the first major statement of her presidency should have been on not just me personally, but should have been on those of us who were so badly hurt during these past 5 years. Because when she made her first statement, she said we need national reconciliation. And then she added we should forgive, we should forget and move on. Now, I expected more, and I expect more. 2 days after she was sworn in as president, I made the first move. I tried to call her. I spoke to her personal assistant, who has now become the secretary to the presidency. And that was 2 days after she was sworn in. And I told this gentleman that I would like to speak to the president about myself and about our country. And the gentleman was very polite. He told me that it's very hectic here. Magufuli hadn't been buried then, so there was a lot that was going on, and I could understand. I understood when the gentleman told me she cannot speak to you right now. Let's finish all this overflowing in tray, and then we'll get back to you. And I said, fine. I was not in a particular hurry. So I made the first move. And I was promised that she would get back to me. She hasn't. 3 months later, we wrote within that week, within a week of her coming to office, my party chairman wrote to her officially requesting a meeting with her at an appropriate stage, at her own convenience. And that same week, after receiving our letter, she wrote back, her office wrote back to not only acknowledge receiving our request, but they promised that the president would get back to us at the appropriate time. And that same week, she made a promise to the nation when she opened parliament. When she spoke she addressed the National Assembly, and she said that she would be inviting political leaders for a meeting. That was 3 months ago, and we are still waiting. In the meantime, she has had very publicized big meetings with what are called wazee wa Dar es Salaam. Wazee wa Dar es Salaam are wazee wa CCM wa Dar es Salaam. She did not promise to speak to wazee wa Dar es Salaam, but she has spoken to them. She spoke to wanawake wa Tanzania. When you look at who she spoke to, these were thousands of them. These are wanawake wa CCM wa Tanzania. She did not promise to speak to wanawake wa CCM or wanawake wa Tanzania. She has had a meeting with vijana wa Tanzania. If you look at who she spoke to in Mwanza, these are vijana wa CCM wa Tanzania. And she did not promise to meet with the vijana wa Tanzania or vijana wa CCM. This past week, she's spoken to the Catholic clergy, our Catholic bishops, very openly. She never promised to speak to the Catholic bishops or any other religious leader. The only people she promised to be meeting with, she hasn't done so.
Maybe it's a build-up to that.
The political opposition, which suffered so severely under the Magufuli regime,
the previous regime.
Yeah,
Maybe it's a build-up to that, Tundu.
Maybe.
But
she hasn't said that it is a build-up to that.
She hasn't indicated the status of that planned meeting.
It's we are the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, her administration will eventually be judged on what she did with the political opposition.
That's true.
If she pretends to treat us with the contempt with which we were treated by her predecessor, she will go down in history as a major disappointment, as a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Magufuli tried to destroy us. He failed. The opposition is much stronger today than it ever was before. So if we survived Magufuli, we will definitely survive Samia Suluhu Hassan.
All right.
So we are the elephant in the room. She simply cannot avoid us.
She cannot afford to
And
ignore
the
you.
sooner, the better, because we are the elephant in the room.
It's 5 minutes to 9 o'clock. We'll be saying goodbye to our audience on KTN Home shortly. As we do that, if everybody who's watching you this morning, who's seeing the opposition leader in Tanzania, the alternative voice and the alternative leadership in Tanzania in the studio today, some of them are Tanzanians in Kenya. Some of them are people who have links and family in Tanzania. What would you tell them?
That's a very good question. I would tell our people in Tanzania, and our friends and neighbors in the region, in Kenya specifically, because I'm here, that there is reason for guarded optimism, cautious optimism. things are certainly much better than they were 4 months ago. There is a lot of good feeling, but our people should not be misled by good feeling alone. There certainly have been very good and very soothing statements, but actions speak louder than words. So our people should not be taken away by this change of tone and by these soothing words from our president. We love her. We should love her, but we should love her by telling her to do what she must do. And what she must do is take the country back on a democratic path. She was vice chairperson of the Constituent Assembly that was intended to give us a new constitution. Now she has no excuse. She could have had an excuse then because that constitution-making process was shut down by President Kikwete. She is the president now. The buck stops with her. We, the people, and our friends and neighbors should help her by telling her to do the right thing.
And it's only one way to do it, to get it done.
And in my view, there is only one way to do it. Democracy, rights, justice.
Thank you very
Not
much.
otherwise.
Tundu Antiphas Mogwai Lissu, opposition leader.
How do you pronounce my word, my name so beautifully? That's what my people in Singida would pronounce it.
We have links in Singida.
You never know.
Thank you very much for joining us today in the Situation Room, and thank you for the enlightenment that you brought to us.